Well, a very warm welcome to everyone from Salt Church, Los Alcatraz, and likewise to anybody else who's joining us for this video today. This is the fifth Sunday, the last Sunday of the season of Lent. And our message this morning is an extension really of last week's, the title of which was, Yes, There is Light at the End of the Tunnel. Last week we were saying, yes, there is light, but you need the right kind of eyes through which to see it. And this week, yes, there is light at the end of the tunnel, but you need the right kind of ears to hear the voice of the one calling you out of darkness. Yes, there is light at the end of the tunnel, but you need the right kind of ears to hear the voice of the one calling you out of darkness. And we begin in the prophet Ezekiel chapter 37, dem bones, dem dry bones. You may be familiar with the old African American slave worker anthem that's drawn from this passage. Now Ezekiel was a prophet who was given some incredible visions with great clarity. At a time when the chosen people were far removed from their beloved and promised land, they were living as exiles in Babylon. And this prophet gives us a window into God's heart and mind. Ezekiel saw the glory of God leaving the Jerusalem temple. It was a calamity that was beyond comprehension. Later, he also saw that same glory return and then was given divine instructions and blueprints for an even greater and more glorious structure. And as part of that unfolding canvas, we come across what is perhaps arguably the most famous part of his book. It's here that we read of the renewal of God's people. They're being brought back from the dead. Now, it is true that the children of Abraham and Sarah have suffered at the hands of many enemies over the millennia. Today, the Jewish people are still persecuted and vilified. However, perhaps the greatest tragedy is that they've ever faced is one that they brought upon themselves. Be holy because I am holy, said God. You are to be my witnesses to the surrounding nations. You are to leave your pagan past behind and live such good lives that others will really want to follow suit. Sadly, that was not to be the case, and the chosen people have too often disregarded their chosenness. And that might have been the end of it, had the Lord not been a covenant-making God, or more importantly, a covenant-keeping God. He is holy and cannot go back on his word. And even though the other party in the covenant broke their arrangements, he remains true and straight, solid as a rock. And yes, the 12 tribes duly bore punishment for their rebellion over many generations. But Yahweh's plans, God's plans, were always to prosper and not to harm. And thus it is when Ezekiel views this valley of the dry bones, he knows only too well that it's God's desire, but God alone can bring that new birth. The picture language here of dry bones becoming living flesh wonderfully depicts what it means when they say we are born again, or perhaps born from above of water and the Spirit. Which brings us on to John chapter 11 and the raising of Lazarus. This provides us with a very personal picture of renewal. As Jesus physically returns his friend to the living world, so we get ourselves a glimpse of something deeper and more profound. Of course, Lazarus was to subsequently die a natural death once more. But this incident brings to us what some theologians have called an enacted parable, a parable in action. And as with the vision given to Ezekiel, here we see the flesh being made alive again, bones coming to life. But importantly, as with the Ezekiel vision, only by the word of the Lord. But notice, if you will, three things here. A, Jesus called Lazarus by name. B, Lazarus recognised the voice of Jesus. And C, Lazarus responded in obedience to what he heard. See, Jesus calls us all by name. But the Bible tells us that only his sheep, the sheep of his pasture, recognise his voice. So the question to you, to me, to all of us is, do we recognise the voice of our divine shepherd? Well, Lazarus did certainly recognise that voice. But there are lots of voices clamouring for our attention, offering us any number of choices. How have we considered what it means to filter out some of these other options, to focus on what the Spirit of God is saying through the words of the Bible? And finally, we learn that Lazarus responded in faith. Jesus called him by name. He recognised that voice calling him. And then Lazarus, he responded in faith and obedience. And there's the rub. And it's at this point that the Apostle Paul can come in with some wise comments and summing these things up in his own inimitable way. Because he says to us, in our natural state, we don't belong to the line of God's people making our way into his presence, being able to filter out those other voices, to concentrate on our shepherd, to follow where he leads. In our natural state, we belong in the darkness of the tomb with no way out. But we who have crossed over into the kingdom of God, we are no longer dry bones. For sure, we're not yet the finished article. We are work in progress. But we can be sure that there is light at the end of this particular tunnel in the tomb. We who have crossed over into the kingdom of God can hold fast to the promise of life in the eternal light of God, where he promises there will be no more death, no more pain, no more tears, no more sorrow. Them bones will no longer be dry, but the living framework of a glorious resurrection body. Jesus called Lazarus by name, and he's calling to each one of us today by our name. I wonder if we're tuned in to hear him. Lazarus recognised that tomb in the deepest, darkest part of the tomb. He recognised that voice amongst all the others clamouring for his attention. So whatever life has thrown at us, or is throwing at us now, and that's quite a lot, can we discern that same voice above the cacophony that is all around and about? Lazarus responded in faith, and he followed the call, however incredulous that must have sounded to him. Yes, he responded in faith. The question is, what about us? Well, I can only answer for me, and only you can answer for you. However, in these dark and difficult days, Is there a better choice to make? And as a Christian, I cannot think that there is. You see, God, though, is a gentleman, and he will honour the choices that we make, whatever they may be. In the book of Revelation, the last book of the Bible, there's this picture of Jesus knocking at the door, awaiting an invitation to come in. He does not arrive with a battering ram to force his way and knock the door down. And if that's an attitude he's taken with his own people, the church, he certainly won't force himself on those who are reluctant or resistant. But any sign of welcome, however hesitant, will result in an opportunity to meet with the one whose hands flung stars into space, the one who is concerned with every detail of your life. Now, you may not be in that place of certainty. Maybe you are listening to this and pondering the times we live in, and questions that you perhaps never stopped and considered in the past are now very much at the forefront of your mind. So what about this life and death? Is there any such thing as life after death, real life after death, I mean? And if you're contemplating such things and would like to know what we as Christians believe, then please do get in touch. You can find Salt Church Los Alcatraz on Facebook, or Google us, we'll take you to our website. Please don't worry about doing so. We always promise you won't be harassed or harangued. It's just an opportunity to ask a question, any question. And remember the golden rule: there is no such thing as a stupid question. If you'd simply like prayer for yourself or someone that you know, then please visit the website and click on the Contact Us tab, which is at the top right of the screen, and that of the homepage on the screen, and that will get you to us. So thank you for listening. Keep safe, be faithful to the guidelines, and look after yourselves. So may God bless you and keep you. May the Lord make his face to shine upon you and be gracious unto you. May the Lord lift his countenance towards you and grant you his peace. Amen.